Hello and welcome back to another Flash CS6 tutorial. The moment you have all been waiting for, I'm going to go over the selection tool, the subselection tool, and the free transform tool. These are the three tools that you're going to use when you want to move around shapes that you've already created. So I'm going to begin with the selection tool, and it's pretty straightforward. I can either click on an object to select it, and normally what Flash tries to do is it tries to select everything associated with it. So if I select the fill, you can see I've selected all the fill here. Or if I just click on the edge, I can get just part of the stroke. You see that's not the entire stroke. If I want the whole stroke, I have to click, hold shift, and I can select multiple things. So click, 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 while holding shift to select multiple. The other way to select multiple things, just to click and drag. So in my selection tool, clicking and dragging, and now everything within this box or this marquee that I'm generating, everything underneath it is being selected, and I can pull this apart, move it around, do whatever I want. Now, nifty thing about the selection tool is if you just click and drag on a point, you can actually move it around. So when you work with strokes, you can actually manipulate the stroke and the shape of the stroke when you just click and drag. If I click first and then click again and drag, it moves. But if I just click it that first time and drag it around, and you can tell by that little curved icon next to my selection tool arrow, you can see that there's a little line. That's to let me know that I'm going to be working with a curve, versus over here it's saying I'm working with a corner. So I can click, move these things around, and play with my shape until it's some awkward kind of upside down looking Pikachu. That's kind of, I don't know, that's terrible. That's terrible. So I'm undoing everything by pressing Control Z. That's the selection tool. You click and drag to do a box. You can select an individual piece by just clicking on it, or you can click and drag to manipulate whatever it is you're working with. If you select a shape, a fill, and you click and drag, it's just going to drag the fill. But if you select an outline or a stroke, you can actually change the way the shape works. And if you're wondering, what is this, when I select and drag the stroke, why is it doing it this way? What's going on? Well, I'm going to go to the subselection tool, and now I'm going to click on the stroke, and you can see I have all of these points surrounding my shape. And pretty much these are the points that are used to create this shape. So if I select an individual point, move it around, you can see that that individual point gets moved. Pretty straightforward, right? But what about these curved ones? I'm going to drag this curved one out of the way, and you can see we have these handles attached to it. These handles allow you to change the type of curve. So if I wanted to shrink this in, I can select a handle, and pretty much whatever way you drag these curves around is going to change the way the object curves. So you can move the individual point, then you move the handles on it. The handles change the curve, the point changes the location. Going back to the selection tool just really quick, one thing I forgot to mention. So I was using subselect to get these outlines on all these points. I'm going back to selection tool, and you can see here I have this curved line. I'm going to go ahead and select this whole curved line. You notice on the bottom left here I have the option for smooth and straighten. And if I don't have anything selected, you see I can't actually do anything with these. If I go ahead and highlight everything, I have this curved line. Go ahead and click on straighten. You can see if I keep clicking it, my line eventually turns into a straight line. Versus if I click smooth, it tries to make it nice and curvy, which kind of eventually turns into a rounded line. But you can see it's very smooth. There's no kinks in it. So moving on. We have the free transform tool. So let's say I wanted to rotate something. I can just go ahead and click, and now I have the option to rotate. I have the option to skew, and I have the option to scale. So I have skew, where I can kind of put it on a slant, rotation, just rotate it around a point, and skew. And I can skew it either, I can skew it horizontally, or I can skew it vertically. But going back to the rotation part of this, if I want to rotate something, and I want to do it on 45-degree angles, I can hold down the shift key. So if I don't hold down the shift key, I get this weird, or not weird, but I can basically rotate it to any point I want. But if I'm trying to line stuff up, make it nice and pretty, hold down the shift key and then drag around, and you see it's snapping to this location that I have here. Now the one thing I want you to pay attention to is this white circle in the middle. This white circle here is the center point. So if we do any kind of rotation, it's going to rotate around that center point. So right now in the center, or sorry, it's in the middle. If I move it around, you see it's rotating around the middle. But if I were to drag it down to the bottom left corner, you can see now it's going to rotate around the bottom left corner. And if you notice with the free transform tool, it's not selecting my outline unless I actually click on the outline. So if you want multiple things, you have to hold down shift and click everything that you want, or just like the selection tool, you can click and drag. Now notice on the bottom left here we have a bunch of options for our free transform tool. One of those options is rotate and skew. Another one is scale. We have distort. Then we have envelope. And pretty much what these do, it makes it a little easier to focus on the specific task you're trying to accomplish. So if I just want to rotate, see now I don't have an option to scale anymore. All I can do is rotate. When I hover over this corner, it's giving me an option to rotate. And it also, remember, it's rotate and skew. So in the center here, if I hover over the center point, I get the option to skew it. Hover over this, or not center point, but midpoint here, midway, the side. Same thing over here. So I'm just pressing Control Z to undo. And I'm going to show you scale. So now if I select any of these sides, I'm making it smaller or larger. That's what scale means. Oops, I have to actually have that selected. The other one is distort. So distort is a little different. Pretty much it allows you to manipulate your shape and distort it. So kind of imagine that this box in the background is a piece of cardboard that this is drawn on. If you were to turn this piece of cardboard or kind of move it around when you're in distort, it's basically you're going to see that angle. So if I would turn this piece sort of to the sides, you can kind of see that it's kind of sort of rotating in 3D space. That's just something cool you can do if you need to mess with this shape. The next thing is envelope. What envelope does, kind of difficult to explain, but imagine that there's a grid behind here. So this grid here with all these points on it, I can change these points, and you can see however I change these points, it kind of makes this weird kind of water rippling sort of effect. Like if you were to hold something in front of, or if you were to look at, let's say, rocks at the bottom of a river while the water's flowing over it, you can imagine that this distortion envelope was changing over and over, and now you got this weird shape that doesn't entirely look like what it originally did. So I'm going to press Control Z to undo, keep undoing, blah, blah, blah. Point being, we have a selection tool. If you want to select things on a grand scale, if you click and drag around, you can manipulate the outline. Or if you click and then click and drag, you can drag things away. The Subselect tool, you can select outlines on things, and you can change the way the shape is. So we can select individual points. They're called anchor points. Or we can change, sometimes if the line is supposed to be curved, they have handles. So this anchor point here is a curved anchor point, and now we have these handles we can manipulate to kind of play around with the curve that we already have. The final one was free transform. This is for rotating, scaling, skewing, and distorting. So that's about it for this video.